Section 4 of the Western Boundary and Other Essays, by Helmuth von Moltke, translated by Charles Flint McClumpher. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Alistair. The Western Boundary, Part 3. It was equally dangerous to leave the French so much power, yes, indeed, to leave it in possession of the German provinces and so important a military-political outpost as Strasbourg. It was dangerous to make only Napoleon the scapegoat, and to heap upon him all the curse, and to spare France itself, for history teaches that Napoleon only continued the wrong the French kings, long before him, had done us. Napoleon was not the first cause, and France the second cause, but France the first cause, and Napoleon the second cause. Napoleon was a passing event, France was permanent. With France we have had to do centuries before, and with France we shall have to do centuries to come. Hence it is not a question of the weakening of Napoleon, but of France. Wholly apart from the internal political arrangement of the newly established German Confederacy, it was without doubt in the interest of all German states that France was weakened, that at least it did not retain Strasbourg and the German provinces. As regards this boundary question, it is quite immaterial how the union of German states is arranged internally. Whether Germany is an empire or a confederation of many states, whether the form of government is an absolute monarchy or a constitutional one, is of no account, but it must always seek to insure itself against attacks from the neighbour on the west, and once and for all, to fix the western boundary, which has been jeopardized so many times. But unfortunately the external question has been forgotten on account of the internal one. Contention over how Germany is to be constructed internally has taken the attention from that far more important contention over the boundary. They did not reflect that there is no lack of time in undertaking internal reforms, but that incalculable time will never replace the loss of frontier provinces which they now have, and surrender again in an unexpected moment. If, however, we turn from Germany and fix our attention upon France only, it becomes as manifest as daylight that France owes only gratitude to the German powers, which, as conquerors, passed such a generous sentence upon it, and left it so many advantages at the cost of Germany. Never was a foe more kindly and sparingly treated than were the French at the time by the Germans. But the French are unwilling to acknowledge this. The plain facts speak, but they are unwilling to hear anything. They behave as if a great wrong had been done them. The French Revolution ended with the satisfaction of the want that had called it into existence. The foreign, especially German powers, were so generous as not to disturb this natural development in any way. France kept the German legal guarantees which it had desired in the year 1789. A constitution, a constitutional king, responsible ministers, 2 houses, equality before the law, freedom of the press, public administration of justice, etc., as England has. It could be satisfied with these in 1815 also, and in 1830 they were continued. The July Revolution proved that these Germanic legal guarantees answered the actual need of the French people, for they survived it. The anti-Germanic Romance party did not succeed in overthrowing these, although it strived to do so in a double manner when it wished to restore, by the decrees, the despotic system of Louis XIV, and by the Republican and Bonapartean uprisings, the Convention and the Empire, those 2 ghostly regenerations of the old Roman world. Meanwhile, Romanism gave vent to its indignation in the free press everywhere. It first invoked national honour, the old need of fame, and the warlike disposition in which this is rooted. Then it invoked the ancient covetousness of the nation, the lust to enrich itself with foreign possessions. Reconquest of the left bank of the Rhine and of the Netherlands was the watchword of the national, and from time to time was regularly re-echoed in the Houses of Congress also. The same idea was made the basis of numerous historical works and memoirs, which were disseminated in France and over all Europe, and in which the deeds of the Grand Army, and the majesty of the empire were recalled to the memory of the French with all the colours of an ardent imagination. By these means, which should have aroused national feeling, men fought at the same time against the foreign policy of the citizens' king and against the foreign land itself. Now they wished to warn, then to terrify. But since the citizens' king was supported by the majority of proprietors, of fathers of the house and family with whom the need of the simple Germanic legal guarantees is greater than the Romance's desire for war, Romanism pointed a special weapon against these citizens, namely, the republican weapon. In opposition to the constitutional monarchy, which is favourable to the citizen class, he demanded democracy, the political emancipation of the proletarian, in a word, the mob rule, as in the year 1793. He wished to destroy the government of the proprietors, which dissatisfied him, by the revolt of the non-proprietors. In behalf of this he harangued the crowd with the old cosmopolitan theorems of the new forms of St. Simonism, with the ideal of the Republic of Workmen, etc., and he awakened at the same time the bloody remembrances of the Reign of Terror, partly in order to accustom the mob again to the cannibalistic appetites, to fill them with horrible passions, partly in order to make the peaceful citizens afraid. Since, furthermore, a happy home life and the sanctity of marriage are the chief supports of citizenship, Romanism pointed its weapons against these also, and declared open war against marriage and morals, and at the same time, of course, against Christianity, just as it did before in the first revolution. All the impiety and obscenity of the older Voltairian school were rummaged up again. The immoral literature of the earlier times was scattered abroad in new publications, and was supplemented by numberless new books of the same kind. The theatre courted these Jacobin tendencies. Crime and lewdness were introduced upon the French stage after the order of the day, just as in the pleasure writings. Finally, as the internal revolutionary attempts and the oft-repeated murderous plots against the life of the king amounted to nothing, Minister Thiers succeeded in bringing about a war with a foreign power, and although breaking out of the same was hindered by the wisdom of the king, yet this event had necessarily started great activity among the neighbours, and especially in Germany. Despite the wisdom of the king, the war cry was louder in France than ever, and men of the most diverse parties agreed in this matter. No longer did merely the national, no longer merely the proletarian and the beautiful-haired lounger about town of Paris desire the left bank of the Rhine, but a minister himself, honourable peers, extremely conservative deputies cried in the same tone. On the other hand was heard remonstrated, "Now is not the time to think of conquests in opposition to all European arms." But not a voice was heard to lift itself against the right and morality of conquest. That France actually had a right to the left bank of the Rhine, and that the Rhine was France's natural boundary, was everywhere in France regarded as well known, as something that was a matter of course. Even though peace is continued, the younger generation in France is bred to believe that it has a sacred right to the Rhine, and its mission is to make it, at the first opportunity, the boundary of France. The Rhine boundary must be a reality. That is the theme for the future of France. We think that we have sufficiently proved in the preceding historical discussion that France has not the slightest legal claim to the Rhine boundary, but we also know very well that all that has been said to the French about it has been like talking to the wind. They will not hear. The more plainly all the proofs of history and nature and all the arguments of reason and morals speak against them, the less they are willing to hear of them. So it only remains to be seen whether Germany is strong enough, and will remain so, to reject by force the illegal claims of France under all circumstances. It is truly lamentable that, after we have been neighbours of 2,000 years' standing, after we have received so many blows from the French, and given them so many back in turn, they, notwithstanding, have not yet been able to bring themselves to understand their true position to us. The study of history flourishes in France, as with us. 1,000 means and avenues to intelligence are open, and yet such a blinded passionateness prevails among the French that they intentionally deceive themselves with an illusion and disdain to see the truth, even in the brightest daylight. Thoughtful reflection, reason, justice, and fairness, which ought to be present in the intercourse of two such old and powerful neighbours, and which are always ready to keep, are despised by the French. Only might shall decide. Whenever they differ with us, they seize the sword. History must vanish in all directions before the passion of the moment. Future dangers are despised just as past experiences are trampled underfoot. Desire rushes upon its object in spite of everything, indifferent as to who will perish thereby. Even though we are strong enough to drive away might with might, yet it is sad to see the darkness of rude, barbarous passion, and the domain of unreasonable force again impend threateningly over us, after so many experiences, and in the century of the greatest enlightenment. But who warrants us that some weakness will not some time come upon us, that we shall not be involved in some conflict of internal or external policy, wherein our vigilance and our strength will be relaxed? What have we then to fear from a neighbour who knows no right but might, and who is not ashamed openly to confess that he, today even, as in the century of fist combats, is only on the watch to find us once weak, disunited, or unguarded, in order to fall upon us again and rob us? Therefore it is our task, if we cannot instruct the old wicked neighbour, to make our good right perfectly clear to ourselves at least, to bring the whole body of the German nation to consciousness. To no German must it be hidden or remain indifferent that if France and Germany ever come to settle with each other, all debt is on his side and all credit on ours. We have to demand of France only what it has wrongfully torn from us. France, on the other hand, has nothing to demand of us, not a hamlet, not a tree. The Rhine is, as Arndt has said briefly and well, Germany's river, not Germany's boundary. If we argue from historical right, then everything that France has gained on its eastern frontier since the 13th century has been robbed from Germany, then all Burgundian and Lorrainian lands are our property wrongfully seized upon, and we should have accordingly still more to reclaim than the boundary fixed by the language. If we argue from the national point of view, and make the language the national boundary of the nations, then the entire Rhine belongs to us, its bank on the left and right, for German has been spoken in the whole river district of the Rhine for 14 centuries. Accordingly, France would not have to claim the left bank of the Rhine from us, but we should have to claim Alsace and Lorraine from it. If, finally, we argue from positive right as it has been fixed by the last treaties, then France has sanctioned indeed its unjust possession of Lorraine and Alsace by means of these, but these treaties exclude France from every claim to the other parts of the left bank of the Rhine. But if France no longer recognises the treaties of 1814 and 1815, the only legal titles that have secured to it its old theft from Germany, and which we have always honestly recognised, though they were very detrimental to us, if France itself breaks these treaties and begins war, then we ought to unite with the firm determination, as God wills, and as he grants victory to the righteous cause, never again to make those treaties the basis of a new peace, and not to sheathe the sword until our whole right has become ours, until France has paid its whole debt to us. Our task is to educate more intelligently and more thoroughly the political sense which seems to return gradually among us, after that we have lost it for centuries, that is, to view all the questions of the day, be it the discussion of a principle or of some particular point of interest, from a higher national point of view, and never to forget the external policy because of internal differences. This forgetfulness alone has been the source of all our misfortune. Only because we Germans were quarrelling among ourselves about opinions or about provincial interests, and thereby forgot to protect our frontiers against external foes, could neighbours have robbed us and weakened us. Much has happened to prevent the return of such unfortunate quarrels in Germany for the future. The German peoples no longer cherish that former unreasonable jealousy towards one another, or by no means to such a degree as formerly. The dynasties also are more closely connected, and they find their interest is much better protected by a policy of agreement than formerly in one of separation. Only the strife over opinions and convictions, over constitutional and religious questions, is still rife, and has not yet reached a satisfactory solution. But has too much been asked of a nation so great, so ancient, so experienced, and so thoroughly educated as the German, if one begs of it not to hostilize itself within itself, so long as so many foes threaten it from without? Whatever the object about which we hostilize ourselves, the result will always be that each of our inner quarrels will be used from the outside for our ruin. We must ever regard ourselves, even in the midst of peace, as a great army in camp and in sight of a powerful foe. In such a condition it does not become us to take our stand hostilely against one another, however natural and right may apparently be the occasion for it. We must always stand with our face toward the enemy without. End of section 4.